Unraveling the Christine Jessop mystery, a story of loss, injustice, and redemption. The Disappearance of Christine Jessop, Part 1. Welcome to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. I'm your host, Jay Nicoll, and today we embark on a journey into one of Canada's most haunting and complex cold cases, the murder of Christine Jessop. On October 3, 1984, a 9-year-old girl vanished from the quiet, close-knit town of Queensville, Ontario. Disappearance that would shatter a community, launch a sprawling investigation, and expose the fragility of justice in ways few could have predicted. What began as a desperate search for a missing child spiraled into a decades-long saga marked by investigative missteps, a wrongful conviction, and a relentless pursuit of the truth. Christine Jessop's story is not just a tragedy. It's a case that gripped the nation and reshaped Canadian legal history. Her murder remained unsolved for 36 years, haunting investigators, her family, and the public alike. A local man, Morin, was arrested, tried, and convicted of the crime, only to be exonerated years later when DNA evidence proved his innocence. It wasn't until 2020, with the help of cutting-edge genetic genealogy, that the true killer was identified as Calvin Hoover, a man who had lived quietly in the shadows of this case until his death in 2015. In this episode, we'll take you back to the beginning, October 3rd, 1984. We'll explore Christine's early life, her world as a spirited 9-year-old growing up in rural Ontario. We'll walk through the day she disappeared, piecing together the last moments before she vanished from sight. You'll hear about the massive search that followed, hundreds of volunteers combing fields and forests, driven by hope and fear. And we'll dive deep into the initial police investigation, the methods they used, the mistakes they made, and the tunnel vision that zeroed in on Morin, a neighbor who became the prime suspect despite shaky evidence. This podcast is about more than just recounting events. It's about understanding how a case unfolds, how investigators navigate clues and dead ends, and how a community grapples with loss and uncertainty. Through archival interviews, court records, and insights from those who've lived through it, we'll uncover the details of this heartbreaking case with the respect and accuracy it demands. We'll look at the investigation's early days, the pressure to find answers, the reliance on outdated techniques, and the decisions that set this case on a troubled path. Christine's story is one of family's unwavering fight for justice. A justice system forced to reckon with its failures, and a mystery that lingered for decades until science finally caught up. So let's step back to 1984, to a crisp autumn day in Queensville, and begin unraveling the disappearance of Christine Jessop. The case is as much about the search for truth as it is about the cost of getting it wrong. Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. It's a gripping true crime podcast uncovering unsolved murders, disappearances, and forgotten crimes from Ontario and beyond. Told with deep research, compelling storytelling, and a voice for the victims. Join us today, where every clue could lead to answers, and every case deserves a second look. Christine's early life. Christine Jessop was born on March 12, 1975 in Toronto, Ontario, the youngest of 2 children. She had an older brother, Kenneth, known as Kenny. The Jessop family eventually settled in Queensville, a quiet rural community about 60 kilometers north of Toronto. With a population of just 800, Queensville was a tight-knit place where neighbors knew each other by name. Children like Christine could spend their days riding bikes, playing with friends, and exploring the fields and woods near their modest 2-story farmhouse. By all accounts, Christine was a bright and cheerful child. At Queensville Public School, where she was a grade 4 student, her teachers remembered her as outgoing, with a wide smile that lit up the classroom. She had a particular love for animals, stray cats, birds, and her pet beagle, Freckles, whom she doted on. Christine often spoke of becoming a veterinarian one day, a dream that reflected her gentle and caring nature. Her days were filled with simple joys, pedaling her bike down quiet streets, tending to her pets, and spending time with friends like Leslie Chipman, a playmate she often saw after school. The life for the Jessop family wasn't without its struggles. In 1984, Christine's father, Bob Jessop, was serving an 18-month sentence in the Toronto East Detention Centre for a fraud conviction, having misappropriated funds after swindling elderly family friends. His absence left Janet Jessop, Christine's mother, to manage the household with the help of Kenny, who was 14 at the time. Despite these challenges, Christine remained a source of joy for her family. Janet once reflected, "She was always happy, smiling. I think of her, what she looked like, what we'd be doing if she were here." On October 3rd, 1984, the day of her disappearance, Christine's excitement was evident. In music class, her teacher had handed out recorders, and Christine couldn't wait to show hers off when she got home. After school, she planned to meet her friend Leslie Chipman in the nearby park around 4:00 p.m. The two girls often played together, and that day seemed no different. Christine stepped off the school bus at 3:50 p.m., waving to a neighbor, Dorothy Ellis, as she headed toward home. She made a quick stop at the corner store run by Harold Grayson to buy a piece of gum with a nickel from the family's change dish. Grayson later confirmed seeing her around 4:00 p.m., one of the last sightings of Christine that day. Meanwhile, her mother and Kenny were out that afternoon, attending a dentist appointment in Newmarket and stopping at Sears to pick up a watch for Kenny. They returned home around 4:10 p.m., expecting to find Christine waiting. Instead, the house was eerily quiet. Her school bag and the day's mail sat on the kitchen counter. Her coat hung on a peg, unusually high for a 9-year-old to reach. But Christine was gone. Leslie Chipman waited at the park, but her friend never arrived. In 1984, Queensville was still a place where children played freely, where doors remained unlocked, where tragedy felt unimaginable. Yet in that crisp autumn day, the safety of this small community would be shattered, marking the beginning of one of Canada's most infamous cold cases. The Disappearance. October 3rd, 1984, dawned crisp and clear in Queensville, Ontario, a small rural town of just 800 souls, where the hum of tractors and the rustle of autumn leaves shaped daily life. For 9-year-old Christine Jessop, it started as an ordinary Wednesday. She attended Queensville Public School, a modest brick building where she was a familiar face in grade 4. That day, her music teacher handed out recorders of the class, a simple plastic instrument that sparked joy in Christine. She couldn't wait to get home and show it to her mother, Janet, and her 14-year-old brother, Kenny, perhaps imagining the tune she'd play for them. School let out at 3:45 p.m., and around 3:50 p.m., Christine stepped off the school bus near her home on Leslie Street. Quiet stretch lined with farmhouses and open fields. A neighbor, Dorothy Ellis, watched her walking toward her family's 2-story home, her school bag slung over her shoulder, her blonde hair catching the fading afternoon sun. At the same time, Janet Jessop was miles away in Newmarket, a larger town about 20 minutes south of Queensville. She and Kenny had a dentist appointment scheduled from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m., a routine visit that Christine, being younger, didn't need to join. With teeth clean and time to spare, they stopped by Sears to pick up a repair watch for Kenny, a small errand that stretched their afternoon. When they pulled in the driveway of their Queensville home at 4:10 p.m., the stillness struck Janet immediately. The house was too quiet. Inside, Christine's school bag rested on the kitchen counter beside the day's mail and a folded newspaper. Her coat hung on a peg in the hall, oddly high for a 9-year-old to reach, a detail would later nag at investigators and family alike. But Christine herself was nowhere to be found. Earlier that day, Christina made plans that reflected her lively, independent spirit. She told her friend Leslie Chipman she'd meet her at a nearby park after school, a spot where the two girls often played, chasing each other through the grass or chatting about their day. Before heading there, Christine followed a familiar routine. She stopped by Harold Grayson's corner store, a tiny shop just a few minutes' walk from her house. Grayson knew her well. She often popped in when changed from her paper route to buy gum or candy. That afternoon around 4:00 p.m., he saw her come and go. Quick transaction before she set off again. It was the last time anyone would report seeing her. She never reached the park. Leslie waited, but Christine didn't arrive. When Janet realized her daughter wasn't home, unease set in. She stepped outside, calling Christine's name across the yard, her voice carrying over the fields. She checked the basement where Christine kept her pet frog Harold and the small tank in the backyard where her beagle Freckles often bounded alongside her. Both pets were there. Christine was not. Janet knocked on neighbors' doors. Dorothy Ellis confirmed seeing her earlier, but no one had spotted her since. Panic rising, Janet retraced her daughter's possible steps, her mind racing with every passing minute. You know something in the back of your mind. You can't find them right away, she later recalled, her words heavy with a mother's instincts. Something's not right. By 6:00 p.m., with dust settling over Queensville, Janet could wait no longer. She called the York Regional Police Service, her voice trembling as she reported Christine missing. Officers arrived within the hour, filing a missing person report and taking stock of the scene. The school bag, the mail, the high-hung coat. Small clues in a puzzle that offered no answers. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit community. Neighbors gathered flashlights in hand and began searching the surrounding fields, woods, and side roads. Volunteers joined the effort, their calls for Christine echoing into the night. The police established a command post at the Jessop home, coordinating what would soon become a massive operation. For Janet and Kenny, the hours that followed were a blur of fear and disbelief. Christine's father, Bob Jessop, wasn't there to share the burden. He was serving an 18-month sentence at the Toronto East Detention Centre for a fraud conviction. News of Christine's disappearance reached him behind bars, and authorities granted him a temporary release and compassionate grounds to join the search. His arrival brought little comfort to a family already unraveling. As the night deepened, the police escalated their efforts, calling in helicopters to sweep the countryside, canine units to track any scent, and divers to check nearby creeks and ponds. Hundreds of people, neighbors, friends, even strangers, poured into Queensville to help, their footsteps trampling the autumn leaves in a desperate bid to find the little girl with a recorder. Days turned into weeks, and the search grew into one of the largest in Ontario's history. Yet despite the tireless work of the community and law enforcement, no sign of Christine emerged. Queensville, once a place where doors stayed unlocked and children roamed without fear, was transformed overnight. The quiet town that had cradled Christine Jessop's childhood was about to change forever, its innocence lost to a mystery that would haunt it for decades. The search efforts. The disappearance of Christine Jessop on October 3, 1984, shattered the quiet rhythm in Queensville, Ontario, a small tight-knit town where such tragedies were unthinkable. That afternoon, after Harold Grayson last saw her near the Queensville General Store, Christine vanished, leaving behind an empty street and a growing sense of dread. By nightfall, her absence ignited an immediate massive response. Over 200 volunteers, neighbors, friends, and strangers alike, poured into the fields, woods, and ponds surrounding Queensville, their flashlights piercing the autumn dusk as they called her name. The York Regional Police Service took charge, orchestrating a search that would soon become one of the largest in Ontario's history at the time. The effort was a testament to both the community's desperation and its unity. As word spread, Queensville sprang into action. Farmers abandoned their harvest, shopkeepers locked their doors, and parents joined the search, their own children in tow or left safely at home. By 7:00 p.m., a command post had been set up at the Jessop's family home on Queensville Side Road, where officers mapped out search zones and briefed the growing crowd of volunteers. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their searchlights sweeping across a patchwork of farmland and forest. Canine units, with their keen senses, roamed the area alongside handlers, sniffing for any trace of Christine's blue pullover sweater or brown hair barrette. Divers plunged in the chilly depths of local waterways, the Holland River, nearby ponds and creeks, searching for clues beneath the surface. The scope of the operation was staggering. The search stretched beyond Queensville, reaching into neighboring towns like Newmarket and Sutton, as fears grew that Christine might have been taken farther away. Missing person posters sprang up overnight, plastered on telephone poles, storefronts, and community boards across the region. Each one featured Christine's school photo, a bright, smiling 9-year-old with blonde hair and a blue sweater, alongside a description of what she'd been wearing that day: a blue turtleneck, gray stretch pants, blue running shoes. Volunteers distributed flyers by the hundreds, while local media amplified the plea, broadcasting her image and urging anyone with information to come forward. The community's response went beyond logistics. It was deeply personal. Vigils lit up the night at Queensville United Church, where residents gathered to pray, their candles casting a soft glow against the growing darkness of hope. One neighbor later reflected, "It's like the whole town stopped. We all knew Christine. We couldn't believe she was gone." That sentiment echoed through every muddy field and whispered conversation. Janet Jessop, Christine's mother, became the anguished voice of the search, pleading with the public through tearful interviews. "If you have her, please let her go. She's just a little girl." Meanwhile, Bob Jessop, Christine's father, was released from the Toronto East Detention Centre on humanitarian grounds. Serving an 18-month sentence for fraud, he joined the effort, walking the fields alongside volunteers, his presence a quiet symbol of a family clinging to hope amid chaos. For weeks, the search pressed on, a grueling marathon fueled by hope and desperation. Each day began at dawn with volunteers trudging through frost-covered fields, retracing steps they'd taken a dozen times before. They checked barns, ditches, and thickets, hoping for a glimpse of blue fabric or a child's shoe, anything to break the silence of Christine's absence. The police followed every lead, no matter how small, while the helicopters continued their relentless sweeps and the dogs persisted in their hunt. But as October faded into November, and then December loomed, the efforts began to wane. The number of volunteers dwindled, though those who remained were steadfast, driven by a refusal to give up on a girl they all felt they knew. The emotional toll was profound. Queensville, once a place of carefree childhoods, transformed into a town shadowed by fear. Parents locked their doors at night, and the streets grew quiet, the sound of children playing replaced by the murmur of anxious speculation. The Jessop family, too, bore the weight of each passing day. Janet and her son Kenny at home. Bob returned to jail when his temporary release ended. All of them trapped in the limbo of not knowing. The trail had seemed to have gone cold. The hope that had burned so fiercely in those first frantic hours flickered, though it never fully extinguished. That is, till December 31st, 1984. On that New Year's Eve, nearly 3 months after Christine vanished, a farmer in Sunderland, 55 kilometers east of Queensville, stumbled upon a horrific scene in a wooded area off a rural road. Christine's body lay hidden in the brush, her life brutally ended. The discovery shattered the community anew, turning a desperate search into a haunting homicide investigation. For all the helicopters, dogs, divers, and prayers, Christine had slipped beyond their reach, leaving behind a town forever changed, and a case that would echo through the decades. Discovery of Christine's body. On December 31st, 1984, Nearly 3 months after Christine Jessop vanished from Queensville, Ontario, the search for the 9-year-old came to a devastating end. In a wooded area off Concession Road 4 in Sunderland, 55 kilometers east of Queensville, farmer Donald Watson was tending to his property when he stumbled upon a horrific sight. Hidden among the underbrush, partially covered by leaves and debris, lay the decomposed remains of a young girl. It was Christine. Her body, exposed to the elements for months, was in a state that spoke of unimaginable violence. The discovery on the cusp of New Year's Eve turned the community's fading hope into profound grief. The Durham Regional Police Service quickly secured the scene, cordoning off the remote rural site where Christine's body was found. Her remains were transported to the Centre of Forensic Sciences in Toronto for an autopsy, conducted by Dr. John Hilsden Smith, a respected forensic pathologist based at the Hospital for Sick Children. The initial autopsy report, completed in early January 1985, painted a grim picture of her final moments. Christine had been sexually assaulted with evidence of vaginal trauma. The cause of death was determined: massive blood loss resulting from multiple stab wounds to her chest and abdomen. The report noted at least 5 penetrating wounds, likely inflicted with a sharp instrument such as a knife, though the weapon was never recovered. The time of death was estimated to be shortly after her disappearance on October 3, 1984, suggesting she was killed within hours of being last seen at Harold Grayson's corner store. A critical piece of evidence emerged during the autopsy: a semen sample recovered from Christine's underwear. In 1984, forensic technology was limited. DNA profiling was still years away, so the sample was preserved, could not be analyzed for a suspect's identity. The evidence carefully stored would later prove pivotal in solving the case. However, the autopsy was not without flaws. Dr. Hilsden Smith's report failed to document potential bruising or defensive wounds on Christine's body, omissions that later investigations criticized as significant oversights. These missed details could have provided insights into whether she fought back or the precise nature of the attack. But the advanced state of decomposition, after nearly 3 months outdoors, likely complicated the examination. The discovery and its aftermath sent shockwaves through Queensville. The Jessop family, already worn by months of uncertainty, was devastated. Janet Jessop, Christine's mother, received the news at home, where she kept the candle burning for her daughter's return. Her brother Kenny, then 14, later recalled the moment as one that broke something inside us. Bob Jessop, Christine's father, was still grappling with his temporary release from the Toronto East Detention Centre, where he was serving an 18-month sentence for fraud. The community too reeled. One resident captured the collective anguish. Finding her like that, it broke us. We thought we'd bring her home alive. The confirmation of Christine's murder shifted the case from a missing person inquiry to a homicide investigation, setting the stage for a complex and troubled pursuit of justice. While the semen sample held promise for future breakthroughs, the autopsy's limitations, compounded by the body's condition, meant early investigative avenues were narrower than they might have been. Yet the evidence preserved that day in 1984 would one day rewrite the story of Christine Jessop's case, pointing to a truth that lay hidden for decades. The initial investigation. The discovery of Christine Jessop's body on New Year's Eve 1984 transformed a small-town missing person case into one of Ontario's most haunting murder investigations. After nearly 3 months of searching, the 9-year-old's remains were found in a wooded area near Sunderland, about 56 kilometers east of her home in Queensville. For the Durham Regional Police Service, this grim discovery marked the end of hope and the beginning of a relentless pursuit to find her killer. Over 300 officers were mobilized, an extraordinary number that underscore the case's urgency and the community's desperate need for answers. What followed was a sprawling investigation that would test the limits of police work in 1984, revealing both dedication and devastating flaws. The first task was to pinpoint when Christine was taken. Police established a tight window for abduction, between 4 o'clock p.m. and 4:30 p.m. Corner store owner Harold Grayson saw her buying gum. At 4:30 p.m., Janet Jessop returned from a dentist appointment with Christine's brother Kenny to find the house eerily quiet. Janet's timeline did change, at one point placing the time closer to 4:10 p.m., but her version changed under later retellings. Some say coerced by the police to better fit their timeline. Christine's school bag sat on the kitchen counter, coat hung unusually high in a rack, but there was no sign of her, no struggle, no forced entry. In just 20 minutes she had vanished. Investigators theorized that her abductor acted quickly, possibly someone familiar with the Jessop's routine or the layout of the rural Queensville side road home. To build a case, the police launched an exhaustive canvass. They interviewed Janet and Kenny and were cleared by their dentist's alibi. Christine's father, Bob Jessop, was in jail for fraud on October 3rd, ruling him out. Neighbors, teachers, and anyone in Queensville that day faced questioning as officers scoured the area for witnesses. Tire tracks near the Jessop property were examined and local hangouts at the corner store where Christine had bought gum just before disappearing were scrutinized. The effort was massive, but the clock was ticking, and every lead mattered. Early on, suspicion fell on Guy Paul Morin, a 24-year-old who lived next door to the Jessops. Morin was an unassuming figure, a furniture factory worker who played the clarinet and kept bees as a hobby. He had no criminal record, but police found his quiet demeanor and solitary habits peculiar in a tight-knit community. During initial interviews, Morin said he was at work in Newmarket until after 5 p.m. on October 3rd, but a supervisor contradicted him, noting he clocked out at 3:32 p.m. That gap, enough time to drive the 30 minutes back to Queensville, raised red flags. Eyewitnesses added fuel. A farmer reported seeing a car resembling Morin's beige Honda near the Jessop home around 4 p.m., and a gas station attendant claimed Morin stopped by later looking jumpy. Forensic evidence soon tightened the focus on Morin. In January 1985, police searched his home and car, collecting samples for the Centre of Forensic Sciences in Toronto. Hairs on Christine's clothing were deemed consistent with Morin's, and fibers from her sweater matched those in his car's interior. A red thread in her clothes was linked to a sweater in his closet. These findings sound damning, but they came with a catch. Hair and fiber analysis in 1984 and 1985 relied on microscopic comparison, a method prone to subjectivity and contamination. Later reviews would discredit these matches, exposing their shaky foundation. But at the time, they bolstered the case against Morin. Yet the investigation wasn't airtight. Other leads slipped through the cracks. Calvin Hoover, a family friend who worked with Bob Jessop and occasionally watched Christine, was never questioned, as we will detail in the second episode. Reports of a white van idling near Queensville Side Road on October 3rd were noted, but not chased down. A drifter spotted at the corner store days earlier was another overlooked thread. These missed opportunities hinted at a broader pool of suspects. The police's lens they'd fix elsewhere. The investigation's flaws went deeper than ignored leads. Evidence handling faltered. Samples were contaminated at the lab, a fact hidden from the defense for years. The semen stain in Christine's underwear found during the autopsy was preserved but untestable with 1985 technology, its potential overlooked. Retired Durham officer John Doe, whose name we've changed for privacy, later reflected, "We were under a microscope. Everyone wanted this solved yesterday." That pressure, coupled with media headlines and a grieving community's demands, bred mistakes. Perhaps the most damning flaw was tunnel vision. The Kaufman Commission, which reviewed the case years later, called it staggering. Once Morin emerged as a suspect, the police zeroed in, sidelining conflicting evidence and alternative theories. His nervous fidgeting in interviews and a cryptic remark, "If you say it's my hair, I guess it is," were spun as guilt, though his family insisted it was confusion. His absence from Christine's funeral, which he skipped because he never attended one and thought it required an invitation, became another strike against him. The investigation morphed into a mission to prove Morin's guilt rather than uncover the truth. By April 1985, the police felt confident, or cornered, enough to act. On April 22nd, they arrested Guy Paul Morin for first-degree murder, charging him based on the alibi gap, the now questionable forensics, and his oddball reputation. As he was led away in handcuffs, Morin told reporters, "I didn't do it. They've got the wrong guy." For Queensville, the arrest brought relief, tinged with unease. For the Jessops, it was a step toward justice, or so they hoped. Christine's autopsy had painted a brutal picture. She'd been sexually assaulted and stabbed multiple times in the chest and abdomen, bleeding out in a field far from home. The killer was still a shadow, but Morin was in custody. The investigation's early phase was closing, but its errors were just beginning to surface. Flawed evidence, missed suspects, and a rush to judgment had set a course that would take years to correct. In our next episode, we'll dive into Morin's trials and the unraveling of this case. But for now, the wheels of justice were turning, however imperfectly. Up next, the arrest of Guy Paul Morin. Arrest of Guy Paul Morin. On April 22, 1985, nearly 7 months after Christine Jessop's disappearance, the Durham Regional Police took a decisive step that would define the investigation for years to come. They arrested Guy Paul Morin, a 24-year-old neighbor of the Jessops, and charged him with her murder. The arrest stunned the tight-knit community of Queensville, Ontario, where Morin lived quietly with his parents just next door to the Jessop family. The case against Morin rested entirely on circumstantial evidence. A shaky alibi, questionable forensic findings, and his nervous demeanor during police interviews. Police claimed that a hair found in Morin's car matched Christine's, and fibers from her clothing linked him to the crime scene. Specifically, analysts at the Centre of Forensic Sciences in Toronto pointed to hairs in Christine's sweater that were consistent with Morin's, along with fibers from his car's interior, a red thread said to match a sweater in his closet. In 1985, these findings were touted as strong evidence, though later scrutiny would reveal the science was shaky at best. Microscopic hair comparison was subjective, and fiber matches were far from conclusive. But at the time, it was enough to convince investigators they had their man. Morin's alibi. Departure time from work. Morin testified that he left his job at a furniture factory in Woodbridge at 3:32 p.m. on October 3, 1984. This detail comes from a detailed timeline presented in his defense, which was consistent across his statements, and the evidence led by his legal team at trial. The prosecution and police, while skeptical of his alibi, did not dispute this specific departure time. Rather, they argued it still gave him enough time to commit the crime. Multiple sources confirmed that Morin engaged in shopping after leaving work. His defense presented evidence of these activities to account for the time between his departure from Woodbridge at 3:32 p.m. and his arrival home, which was no earlier than 4:14 p.m. His lawyer, Clayton Ruby, emphasized that his shopping, described as picking up groceries, supported the argument that Morin didn't have time to abduct Christine Jessop. Then there was Morin's behavior. In interviews, he came across as nervous and fidgety, his answers sometimes seeming evasive. When shown the hair evidence, he reportedly said, "If you say it's my hair, I guess it is." A response investigators saw as a near confession, though his family argued he was simply overwhelmed and confused. Morin maintained his innocence from the start, pleading, "I didn't do it. They've got the wrong guy." Still, his awkwardness, like skipping Christine's funeral because he'd never been to one, thought he needed an invitation, only fueled the perception he was hiding something. For the grieving community of Queensville, Morin's arrest brought a complicated mix of emotions. After months of fear and unanswered questions, there was relief that police had the suspect in custody. "We just wanted to be over," one resident later recalled. "We need to believe they had the right guy." Yet for those who knew Morin as a quiet, unassuming neighbor, the idea that he'd commit such a horrific act was hard to swallow. The arrest, though, was just the beginning. As we'll explore in episode 2, Morin's journey through the justice system was far from straightforward. He would face 2 trials, a conviction, and a long, grueling fight for exoneration that would eventually expose shocking errors in the investigation. The truth about Christine Jessop's murder and Morin's innocence was still decades away. Christine Jessop's disappearance in that crisp October afternoon in 1984 marked more than the loss of a vibrant 9-year-old girl. It signaled the end of innocence for Queensville, Ontario. The small rural town, once defined by its quiet streets, unlocked doors, and tight-knit community was forever altered. Its sense of safety replaced by a lingering shadow of fear and unanswered questions. For the Jessop family, the pain of not knowing who took Christine, or why, became a burden they carried for decades. Janet Jessop, her mother, kept a candle flickering in the window for years, a quiet symbol of hope that her daughter's fate might one day be understood. Her brother Kenny grew up with the ghost of a sister who never returned, a void that shaped his life in ways words can barely capture. The ripples of this tragedy touched every corner of Queensville, teaching a community bound by trust that even the safest places could harbor darkness. In this episode, we walk through the frantic early days of Christine's disappearance, the heartbreaking discovery of her body, the initial investigation that struggled to find solid footing, the arrest of Morin, a neighbor who seemed an unlikely suspect to some and a convenient target to others, offered a fleeting sense of resolution. But as history would reveal, it was a resolution built on fragile ground, one that would crumble under the weight of a truth still waiting to be uncovered. In our next episode, we'll dive deep into the trials of Morin, a man thrust into not one, but 2 grueling court battles, a wrongful conviction, and a desperate fight for exoneration that exposed the cracks in the justice system. We'll unpack the forensic missteps that sealed his fate, from the flawed hair and fiber analysis that pointed fingers in the wrong direction, to the tunnel vision that kept investigators from seeing the bigger picture. Then in 1995, we'll see how DNA evidence, a tool barely imagined in 1984, stepped in to rewrite the story, clearing Morin's name and proving his innocence after years of anguish. But the journey doesn't end with exoneration. In 2020, a stunning breakthrough using genetic genealogy, a cutting-edge technique that traces family trees through DNA fragments, finally put a name to Christine's killer. Calvin Hoover, a family friend who had evaded suspicion for decades. We'll explore how this modern science delivered answers that eluded investigators for nearly 40 years, bringing a long overdue measure of closure to a case that gripped Canada's heart. Christine Jessop's story is a haunting lesson, the fragility of justice, and a testament to the enduring power of truth. It reminds us of the cost of rushing to judgment, the strength it takes to keep searching for answers, no matter how long the road. If you have any information about this case or others like it, we urge you to reach out. Your voice could be the key to solving another family's mystery. Join us next time on Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. We continue to unravel the layers of the Christine Jessop mystery. I'm Jay Nicoll. Thank you for listening, because every case deserves answers, and every victim deserves justice. Subscribe now to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. Episodes available wherever you get your podcasts.